Well, it looks like we have made it, and that is good. Let me turn this on. I thought it might give me a way to go live here on my, I don't see the live button on there. We have finally gotten to our live broadcast, and I hope you can hear me. Let me make sure I think the volume is up loud enough. And if anybody has trouble hearing me, be sure to let me know. Um, and do you have live on there? Great. Excuse me. And I do want to apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties we weren't planning on, and those finally we got those resolved. And I hope we're going to wait just a few minutes and have some folks join us here with our broadcast. And tonight, the topic that I wanted to talk about tonight is, and it's very good to see everyone, healing childhood trauma and self-differentiation. And there are lots of books about healing childhood trauma. There's lots of advice regarding healing your childhood trauma, from inner child work to body work to cognitive work to affective emotional work. And I don't plan tonight on covering all of those topics because number one, I don't think I could. I don't know if I'm smart enough for all that. But I would like to offer you some helps or things that could be a little different and a little new regarding using the family systems and self-differentiation in healing or regarding healing childhood trauma. And I have written down a few things this evening. I also got a number of questions from you that people have sent in. And I do want to remind you that this evening, when you ask a question, be sure and make the question capital question and put question in capital letters, and then write a brief question. If you put an awful lot of detail into your question, it's going to be harder to answer it this evening. And we have only limited time, and we kind of are shorted just a little bit on our time because of our technical difficulties. My name is Jerry Wise. I guess I should have said that. That would have been a good thing to say at the beginning. And I do self-differentiation coaching for folks, and I try to bring a family systems approach to helping those clients that I have worked with, and I'm hoping to share some of that tonight with you. That we'll probably be online for about an hour tonight, something like that, a little shorter. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, had a little family crisis, and so I didn't get a bunch of sleep, but I wanted to do our broadcast tonight, and I wanted to show up and share some things with you. And I've got some questions that people have sent in to me, and I hope to answer some of those. There are some thoughts that I'd like to share with you. Somebody said Jerry's looking like he's doing what? That I'm looking away or at the wrong place, or looking down, or do you see that comment? Jerry looks like he's speaking down from heaven, a little up by the stars in the vacuum of space. Oh, really? Well, okay. How nice. The is that because of the sun, or is that because of the direction I'm looking? Because we do have sun coming right in this window, and we even have the blinds shut, and it's still coming in on the edges, and I probably look like I'm ethereal or ephemeral, or I don't know what the word is, ghost-like. The let me share these. I've got 5 things that I wanted to share with you regarding healing trauma. And if I apply some of the family systems and self-differentiation theory and work to trauma healing, I would say, number 1, the trauma healing begins with breaking the family trance. And so that's a very important concept of breaking the family trance that we have been in while growing up and into our adulthood, so that we can view our childhood and our adulthood with a more objective and adult view of life. I have a quote from Willis Harmon, who states, "We are hypnotized from infancy. We do not perceive ourselves and the world about us as they are, but as we have been persuaded to see them." And that's a very core concept for family systems, for self-differentiation. We begin with breaking the family trance. That's coming out of denial, starting to look at things the way they really were, accepting pain, accepting feelings, accepting what we saw, heard, felt, smelled, tasted, all how all of our senses experienced our childhood. And much of that we're still experiencing today as adults, because our family of origin is still and continues on inside of us. And that's why we want to break that trance, so we can begin to see the difference between the family in me and me, that those are different entities. We're not just a part of the family super self, but we are us and they are them. And how did we function in that super self, and how did we function in the family? How does the family function within us today? If you want to know how family's functioning in you, one way you can find out is go back at holiday time, at Thanksgiving time, go show up at your family's dinner for Thanksgiving, and show up with all the family there, and attempt to act like an adult the entire time you're there. That could be a real challenge. You also may be resisted for being an adult if you do that. And so that's the pull and push of the family trance, because everybody expects you to operate in a certain way. If you're the scapegoat, then you need to operate in a scapegoat way. If you're the golden child, then you need to act in a golden child way. And everybody expects that, and you better not step outside your role. In fact, I was working with a couple just recently, and her family is very enmeshed. He is the husband to her, and she's the daughter of her in her family, and they view her as the loyal one or enmeshed one to the family, and they view him as kind of skeptical or the enemy because he might try to pull her away from them. Now, I'm sure many of you have experienced that before in different ways. And so the family has a whole list of rules. And in fact, this particular family, even for the adults, had a list of 14 rules that everybody had to follow, even as adults. It's pretty amazing, the enmeshment that is there. And they had and at Thanksgiving, it is required that everyone must take 3 kernels of corn. Everyone must take 3 kernels of corn, and everyone must give 3 things they are grateful or thankful for. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with offering that. What's problematic is you will all do it whether you want to or not. That's where the problem becomes. And so what I was suggesting to them to get them to think a little differently, if we want to change how your husband is viewed in the family and how you are viewed in your family, is how about your husband do the 3 corns and he does it willingly, which he's the one who really doesn't want to do it. Let him do it, and you inform the family you don't want to. He becomes the compliant one. She becomes the outlier or the differentiator. Now all of a sudden we've shifted their relationship in the family, and they had never thought of that. They thought, that would probably work if we did that. That isn't crazy, because it wouldn't be what they expect, and it would really mess with their heads for that to happen. You be the bad daughter, let him be the good son-in-law, and it could be interesting what could happen in the family. So we're talking about that family trance, and those family trances can go on through adulthood, even to the place of saying what we're grateful for and thankful for at Thanksgiving. That you better be doing this, you better like this, and you better be okay with this. Because if you're not, there's going to be a lot of resistance and very awkward if you don't. So the first thing we want to do is begin to break up the family trance. That's one of the things we want to learn in healing trauma that we've experienced. Secondly, trauma healing begins when we recognize and acknowledge our enmeshment to our family of origin and perpetrators who have perpetrated abuse or trauma on us. That we have become enmeshed with them emotionally. And that's often what happens. I was describing in an interview I gave the other day, we were talking about healing family trauma, and that one of the things that makes it difficult is we know every family has a certain level of chronic anxiety. The more immature the family is, the higher the chronic anxiety. The more mature and differentiated the family is, the lower the chronic anxiety that operates within the system. Now, let's take this higher level of anxiety that might be in dysfunctional families, and now let's add trauma, abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of abuse. Now we've increased the chronic anxiety 5-fold. Now it's very, very high. And the higher the chronic anxiety, the more we tend to enmesh together emotionally. And in fact, again, we're talking about emotional enmeshment. So somebody can hate their family and never want to see them and take off and go move to 2 states away, but they still may be overly enmeshed with their family emotionally. Their geography doesn't determine enmeshment. You can be right next to someone and not be enmeshed. You can be 1,000 miles away and be enmeshed. So geography doesn't determine that. And so I like to share that with folks. And so what we want to do is work on that enmeshment, because that keeps trauma going in our adult lives. that enmeshment with perpetrators, with abusers growing up, with our family of origin. And so we want to begin to deal with that enmeshment and work on self-differentiating and self-differentiating ourselves and beginning to detach from that trauma, those perpetrators, and those events. Thirdly, and by the way, there's a lot more that could be said about all of these points, but tonight I don't have time to go into great detail about all of them. We could talk the whole night about number one, but I'm going to at least try to give you five to kind of help you with just kind of a beginning way to think about it. That was number two. Number three, trauma healing begins when we can reframe our position, functioning, and experiences or trauma in a mature, non-illusion, rational way. In other words, we start looking at the past with adult eyes, with eyes that are not totally entranced by the family of origin. And we can do that with asking others to help us to see it differently. And that's part of what we do when we go into therapy, when we go utilize a coach. We then say, how should I look at my family? Can you help me look at my family differently and my experience growing up differently? And so when we do that, then that's when we begin to change or reframe how we see that experience growing up. And that's a beginning of loosening our enmeshment with the trauma and with the perpetrators. Fourthly, trauma healing begins when we begin to differentiate ourselves from the trauma, from the perpetrators, and from our family of origin. And that's what I help people learn to do and practice doing, differentiating themselves from their trauma, perpetrators, and family of origin that's been dysfunctional. Whether it be narcissistic or alcoholism or any number of dysfunctions that families have. And when we begin to differentiate ourselves, we then start to separate ourselves from the pain. And I don't mean deny the pain, and I don't mean push it down. I mean separate, which I mean letting go. And we don't identify it so much as equal to us. And I think so many people tend to think they are their trauma. And no, we're not our trauma. We have been traumatized, but that's different than we are our trauma. And so we, even understanding that, I have people come in and I say, you're not your trauma. Trauma is something that has happened to you. So you have a you apart from that trauma. But I'm not denying the trauma that you've had. We're not denying that whatsoever. And we're going to deal with that and talk about that and begin to reprocess that, reframe it, find ourselves in the midst of it and in spite of it, and find ourselves a sense of self. So that's number 4. And number 5, trauma healing begins when we can choose, or when we can self-soothe and down-regulate that anxiety. If I didn't have my little crisis I had last night, I would have probably ended up with maybe 10 of these points, but we don't need 10. 5 is probably enough for tonight. And so learning to self-soothe, many times we did not learn and don't learn and haven't learned how to do that. And then second of all, we haven't learned how to reduce our anxiety, because chronic anxiety is a really big problem in how we function as mature adults. if you're in an adult situation and you feel too much anxiety, you're going to operate out of your limbic lizard brain, the limbic system, and you're going to not be your true selves. You're going to be your reactive selves. You're going to be your traumatized self. You're going to be your limbic self. You're going to be your anxious self. And we want to be not those. And beginning to think about that in a different way can begin to settle us and get us more calmness. And it's a work that takes time, and it happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you just heard it for the first time. It takes lots of work, courage, and willingness to take a look at the work of self-differentiation to address trauma. So self-soothing, self-caring, and down-regulating the anxiety. Those are very important things for us to do. Okay, I'll come back to that. I'll come back. I've got several questions that people are asking, and I had several questions that people ask me online that I brought with me tonight. I may have to not ask people to do that because we'll have so many questions we can't get them all done in the time that we have. And I think Denise, said something about we need to grieve a lot, the need to grieve a lot. Absolutely. And that's part of the self-soothing and self-caring is giving ourselves the freedom to grieve. And when we begin to, experience our trauma and our growing up in a non-illusion way, meaning it's not illusion, it's not just a hope for, a wish for. Why weren't my parents the good parents I wanted them to be, and when are they going to be that? Once we start looking at that without illusion, then we really have some grief work that begins to come up. Because now I have to grieve the loss of the parents I never had and the parents I never will have. And that's not easy to do because many of us hold on to still a little hope. There's that little inner child in us, even though the adult says, oh no, my mother's a narcissist, my father is, alcoholic, and they can never love me like I know it, like I want. But then there's that little child in us going, oh, but I hope they might. And then that's enough to keep us hooked, and enough to keep us hooked in and not detaching from our parents or our family of origin. Doesn't take much. It's that little hope, and maybe they will change. Maybe God will change them. Maybe a miracle will happen. Maybe if I change enough, they'll change. And we have all of those hopes. And I've gone through all those stages. I've wished for all those things, for sure. Well, this is an interesting question. It has to do with narcissistic families. Jerry, do you think and this is from Jerry Pie, Jerry, do you think it is advisable to reconnect with the narcissistic family of origin after no contact? What would be the healthy steps? Well, there's a lot in your question. I mean, that's not just a yes or no question. And I probably need to know a lot more, because what we want to do is decide, are we applying the right amount of no contact? Are we applying the right amount of self-differentiation? And sometimes we get those confused, because people who don't want to self-differentiate or grow up will just default or choose no contact and go, oh, well, I'm going to write them off. I don't care. Screw them. I'm done. When they've just lost an opportunity to grow and to become more self-differentiated within their system or family of origin. Now, I realize that narcissistic families can be abusive, traumatizing, disrespectful, angry, rageful, and I'm not suggesting you submit yourself to all of that. And the with the narcissistic family, I believe it can be very problematic to reconnect with them after no contact. Now, the issue is, I don't know how much narcissism is in there. I don't know how many people are narcissistic. I don't know if some people have changed or some people haven't. So it's kind of hard to, everybody's an individual. And you can have a malignant narcissist, and then you can have somebody who has narcissistic traits. And that's quite different. And so families can have different people in them that have different levels of narcissism and different levels of toxicity. But I'm not for pushing people back into bad circumstances. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I know I have some people who said, hey, I've gone for no contact for quite some time. I'd like to attempt to reconnect with some parts of my family. There might be other parts they're not going to connect with because they have not demonstrated being trustworthy, or they're still malignant, they're still toxic. And so what we begin to do is we start on the periphery and we start on the edges and start to move in with those kinds of families. And we start to start from far away and move in very slowly. We don't just plow in and say, hey, let's go on a cruise together and see how that all works. I would not suggest you do that. I would suggest, how would they handle me writing them a card? How would they handle me writing them a letter? How would they handle me just calling them and asking them how they're doing? That could tell me a whole lot while connecting with them from afar. And then, only then, do I begin to move in to an inner circle approach. So I always tell people, start way out here on the edges and begin to move in. And if ever it fails, then you can always move back out or stay at the level that you're at. And people will say, well, why even do that at all? Well, again, the goal is it's not to change the family. It's as I mature and as I grow, I become more neutral and less impacted by the craziness of other people because I don't care. They can be as nutty as they want and it doesn't matter to me. Now, abusiveness and raging and all that, that's different than nutty as they want. That's a definitely painful, hurtful, violent kind of thing. And I'm not suggesting that's okay, nor it should be tolerated at all. But there are some people that want to connect with some parts of their family. And I start on the edges and move in and go very slowly. And even just start with contact for contact's sake, that's all you're doing. Contact for contact's sake. Not contact so that we can be best friends, but just contact to have contact and see what happens. Because, see, there's still this systems feelings and systems emotional field that's going on between us. So that even if I just do contact for contact's sake, hi, this is Jerry, nothing else, that still pings throughout the system and pings me as well, just to even do that. So someone wrote, I think John wrote, how do you do what you want if you were the family scapegoat and yourself was annihilated? And I know John, and John's asking a good question. And how do I not do what I don't want to do? If you've been a scapegoat, and if yourself has been annihilated by abusive, narcissistic family, and dysfunctional families, and there are all different kinds. There could be alcoholic families, drug addicted families, narcissistic families, borderline families, bipolar families. There can be all kinds of families where we have all kinds of trauma that can happen because people are not well. They are not well at all. There is a book that I like, and I would suggest this to anyone. And John suggested, how do I say no if I haven't had a self and I've been a scapegoat? How do I learn to say no? Very good question, and not easy to do. There is a book I like, and it's called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. And it's a very good book about learning how to say no when you feel guilty. And tolerating greater guilt so you can say no anyway can be a real move forward. In other words, I can feel guilty and still say no. I can be anxious and still say no. If we're waiting for us to feel perfectly before we make decisions or say no or yes, we're going to be waiting an awfully long time. And so we do begin with saying no while not wanting to say no. We do start with that. And staying in one place and standing alone and standing firm with ourselves. And that's what we're not so used to if we're a scapegoat or we were annihilated, our self was annihilated growing up. We're not used to standing with ourselves. And so of course it's going to be fearful, because who's going to stand with me? Do you know when people ask me, well, how am I going to stand alone? Who's going to support me? And I'm going, well, you're missing the most important person. And who would that be? You. You are the most important person. We're not used to standing with ourselves. We're not used to that. And so I try to help people and train people to learn to stand with themselves. You can stand by yourself. You can stand with yourself. And that can be a very healing thing to do. And we grew up in the family trance believing you can't do that. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You're worthless. You're bad. So you should not stand with you. But that's part of the family trance and the BS that we learned growing up. So there's a book called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. I think it's by Smith. Then I wish I could write a book called When I Say Yes, I Feel Guilty. Because John was talking about how do you do what you want if you were the family scapegoat or annihilated self. And so what he's saying is, how do I say yes? How do I say that's what I'd like? And oftentimes we have the same problem if we're saying no. No, we feel guilty. Yes, we feel guilty. Either guilty or it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I deserve that. It doesn't feel like I should be saying yes. And so I wish there were a book called When I Say Yes, I Feel Guilty. Or actually, When I Choose Myself, I Feel Guilty. Or ashamed. That's another concept of when I say yes, I feel guilty or ashamed. And so what we want to do is resolve and work on that shame and guilt and feeling undeserved and feeling shamed and feeling worthless, and work on that and begin to say yes. And in fact, that's where my beginning experience of the first time I really said yes involved doing two things I wanted to do. I wanted to rent this car I wanted to rent, and I wanted to stay at the Hotel Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. And that was way back in the 80s, way back a long time ago. Shoot, probably before some of the people were born on this. Hate saying that. And I'd never done that before. I'd never said, what would I like to do? If I could do anything, and a therapist asked me that, and I said, well, I don't know. How do I know what I want? How do I know what I should want? I don't ask myself that question. All I ask myself is, what should I do for you? And are you okay so that I'm okay? Those are the questions that I ask as a good codependent. And so making that decision of this is what I would like, and then making the phone calls to do it, and then ended up doing it. And it was the most freeing, exhilarating experience I had had. I didn't know people felt like that. I didn't know you could go and do something you really enjoyed and wanted to do. It was just, and I thought I should feel guilty for that. I definitely don't deserve this, and I should feel guilty for doing something that I would like to do. And John talks about the self was annihilated and he was a family scapegoat, and I think that's where our role was wrong in the family. We had the wrong role, and we showed up with that role, and that's the way that the family treated us in the family trance as the scapegoat. And we were objectified as the that role, and objectified as a scapegoat. And so what we want to do in healing is to personalize ourselves. We need to personalize ourselves because people don't realize how much they objectify themselves. We just internalize that objectification, and then we just objectify ourselves. Oh, Jerry, you're so stupid. Why would you do that? My gosh, Jerry, that's just objectifying me. I'm just an object who is doing wrong. I'm a bad machine. Rather than personalizing myself and having a personal relationship with me. So untangling that objectification and letting some of that objectification go is a beginning to healing of that. The self, let's see, I had dis and denied. Oh, was disdained, yes. When we are annihilated growing up in traumatic families and dysfunctional families, ourselves are disdained and denied. Well, if your self is disdained or looked down upon and denied, then all you are is an object. Then you're not really of any personal value, human value, you're just an object. And so what we want to do is begin to break that trance and begin to do the work that's not easy, but say fantasizing about visiting the planet of non-scapegoatism. The planet where I am not a scapegoat. What am I doing? What do I look like? How am I walking? What do I feel? What do I hear? What am I thinking if I begin to visit that planet? We can visit another planet, the planet of no annihilation. Okay, well, Jerry, that's interesting. I've always felt annihilated. Let me think about what would it be like to have no annihilation. Well, let me fantasize about that. What would you look like? What would you be wearing? How would you walk? How would you talk to other people? We begin to stretch that view about who we are and who ourselves are. And we have to begin to stretch that. Now, people say, well, that sounds so hard, Jerry. It sounds almost impossible. I've never had a self, blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about in one setting, you become a different person. I believe a tremendous amount of change can take place by a small amount of changing that trance and reframing that belief and those beliefs growing up. A small amount can make a big difference. That's been my experience. And I think I've felt that for other people too. Because they keep thinking, well, I'm waiting until I'm all fixed. You don't have to be all fixed. Let's just loosen up that family trance and see if you can begin to maneuver differently. Because you probably can. And then I've also used the concept, what would Betty do? Okay, put yourself in your neighbor's shoes. Walk in his life and go, okay, he wasn't annihilated. He wasn't a scapegoat. Okay, well, what would Bob, what would I see him doing? How would he be acting? What would he be feeling? Now I start to get a new language and a new experience of not being annihilated and not being the scapegoat. Now it's a small new experience, but it is the beginning of a new experience. And then there is the annihilated self and the scapegoat, in which our subjectivity is annihilated. In fact, I've got a workshop on Vimeo called The Annihilation of Our Subjectivity. And that's where how we view the world has been annihilated. And so, how do I begin to view the world in a new way when my way of viewing the world is normal? I mean, that's the water I swim in. So how do you ask a fish, okay, Mr. Fish, do you know where the water is? And the fish would say, what water? I don't know what water you're talking about. Because that's normal for the fish. So that they don't think of it as this is water and this is not water. That they don't have that understanding. Well, it's the way we have and what we've grown up in and our fish bowl. And so we want to begin to change that subjectivity or how we see the world. And that's where we, we borrow other people's objectivity and subjectivity. I had a woman ask me today, she said, I don't know whether this is right or not. So she's borrowing my objectivity by asking me that question. When his family treats me badly, and his uncle or cousin, I don't know what it was sitting behind her, 60 years old, by the way, he's 60, and he's shooting spit wads through a straw at the back of her head. Pretty dysfunctional family. I mean, it's pretty nutty family, very nutty family. And she turns around and goes, what are you doing? Please stop doing that. Her husband, though, is in the family trance. What does he do if he's in the family trance? What's he going to do with that event? Nothing. He's going to say, oh, that's what he always does. I'm glad you told him to stop. Now, how does his wife feel? This is not her family, it's his family. How does she feel? Well, you didn't even stand up for me. You didn't even tell your family, don't treat me that way. Oh, well, you just need to be neutral about it. Just let it go. I don't let it bother me. And that's where I began to help her with her objectivity or subjectivity. She had the objectivity. She knew what went on. Now let me help you with the subjectivity, and your husband too. Your husband is fine for being neutral towards his family of origin, but not fine in terms of being neutral towards his family of origin when it applies to you. That's not normal. And we should not remain neutral. And he did. Hey, well, if they shoot spit wads at the back of your head, hey, that's just crazy old Billy. No. That's where he shouldn't be normal, or shouldn't be neutral. He can be neutral if they say to him, you're just so stupid, John. And he may go, I don't care. I don't care what they think or what they say. It doesn't matter to me at all. But if they say, she's stupid, now wait a minute. I'm not sure I can be neutral for that, because this is my family. I'm blood related to them. And that's where we have to choose our spouse over our family. Always choose spouses over families. If you don't, it is a love buster. And you can read Harley's book, I think. It's called Love Busters. And he will talk about the importance of relationships, marriages, spouses, must be first. No other relationship comes before that. Human relationship comes before that. Because if you do, you will degrade and deteriorate your romantic love in your marriage, and it will slowly begin to erode. It maybe quickly erode if you do that. And that's why she was feeling uncomfortable. But she grew up in a very dysfunctional family, so she didn't know what the rule. She didn't know what was right or healthy, or so she was asking me and borrowing my objectivity, and I was offering that to her. And then she's going, "Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. That's appropriate. That's the right thing to do." And so now, then she said, "Now, how do I get my husband to do it?" Well, now that's a whole nother matter. Now we got to work on that in a different way. Let's see, I think I also had, the other thing we do is we take, if we have not developed very well in terms of annihilation, scapegoat roles that we have been in, then we have to start over and begin to take ourselves to school. And what would you do if you had a child who was behind developmentally in terms of school? What would you do with a kid that was behind developmentally? You would get them some help. You'd get them some extra help. Now, if we're behind emotionally and with our family of origin and all kinds of other ways, we don't think about getting ourselves help. We just keep going on with a cast and crutches. And we don't think about, hey, we need to get some help for ourselves so that we can get caught up to our age. Because you can be 60 years old and still be 14 emotionally. And we need to bring up that emotional development. We need to grow that up. And we need a coach or a therapist to help us with that. So we're developmentally behind, and we want to begin to work to get ourselves caught up from that developmental delay because of our trauma, our dysfunctional families, etc. Well, let's see here. Well, we've got several. Stand with yourself. Oh, I know. Since I don't have a lot of time, Annie writes, what are the steps to learning to stand with yourself? I've got a video on, what's it called? Living, you'd think I'd know, but that would require being sharp. But it's about living without love and acceptance. And you can find that. And that's about standing with yourself. And not just living for everything to be coming into you and love and acceptance. No, you're going to stand for yourself and with yourself. There's another book called Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. And I would suggest that book for Annie. You're saying, what are the steps to learning to stand with yourself? Take a look at her book. And Brene Brown is a family systems, Bowen family systems person, and does TED Talks, and she has some great books out there. Braving the Wilderness. Also, the Courage, Call to Courage. Her books are really good for standing alone, standing with yourself. Then Katie asks, what to do when your sibling's spouse is a psychopath? Well, I'm not sure what you're asking me. What do you do? Stay as far away from them as you can. I mean, I think I would own my own assessment of the sibling spouse if I believe they're a psychopath, and I would communicate that to my spouse and go, how do you feel about your sibling spouse? Do you believe they're psychopathic? And if they go, no, they're not, then we have some talking to do. because we need to get unified about this issue. I'm very uncomfortable with a sibling's spouse. And if let's say your brother has a wife who's a sociopath or psychopath, then I might want to have a talk with your brother and say, I'm going to have a hard time relating and getting along with your wife. And I'm not sure we're a good mix. And I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but I want to give you a heads up because I'm really concerned. And if your brother says, oh, well, you're just being stupid, well, my wife's fine, you're crazy, then I'd say, you have a right to your opinion, and we disagree. I'm very sorry. I wish I could agree with you. But from in the future, I will need to take steps to probably limit my contact with her. And I don't have to go into all the psychology and psychiatry of that sibling spouse. I just need to say what I'm going to be doing based on what I believe in general terms. That I don't need to analyze them or tell them. Now she's a malignant narcissist with psychopathic traits. I don't need to go into all that. I just need to say I don't think we're going to get along very well. I don't think we're going to be a good fit, and so I'm probably going to be limiting my contact and time with her. Well, I don't know why you're going to do that. Well, I've just been trying to explain it to you. But if you don't believe that's the case, I understand. But I'll have to stand alone and do what's right for me. I'm not going to be abused or misused or whatever might happen with a psychopath who is a sibling, spouse. So I got those, and let's see here. Now sometimes the questions, Tamika, I believe, what if they are not related to me and they are my partner? Well, of course, that's much more serious if the problems and difficulties are right next to you in a spouse or partner, then it becomes much more severe and much more difficult to manage. And that's where you have to become clear about you and how you see things, Tamika, and that you may want to have help and support in communicating that with your partner or your spouse. And you may need some professional help to help you do that. Because it's really tricky when we've got that narcissistic spouse. How am I going to handle that narcissistic spouse? Because they're a spouse. They're not a family member that lives in another city. They live in my house. And I have to deal with them and work with them every day. Well, that's certainly something we need to do with getting some professional help to help us. There are also a couple of good books about dealing with borderline and narcissists. And the one I like, the two I like, are written by Margalis Fjellstad, Margalis, and Fjellstad, Fjellstad. Stop Caretaking the Borderline and the Narcissist. And the second one is Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship. And she does a really great job in both of them. She's a very good marriage and family therapist, and she also understands the dynamics because she had a narcissistic spouse. And she also shares the struggle about, do I stay or do I go? And she does a real good job, I think a very mature job, of taking a look at that, because that's not easy. That's not easy at all. I need to take a drink here, get a little moisture. Some Diet 7-Up, that tastes kind of good. I might share Oh, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, there is no cell of our body that does not have a wounded child in it. Thich Nhat Hanh. I know you've seen that name out there, and I love that quote. And there's also another, I think, even not necessarily humorous, but a little humorous. When childhood dies, its corpses are called adults. And that's by Brian Aldiss, Aldiss, Brian. And what I like is when the corpses come to me and they say, Jerry, is there resurrection and new life for me? Because I died as a child. And how do I live again? And I guess I have my own faith and belief that you can. And that you don't have to be a dead adult. You really don't. If I don't, you don't have to. And I certainly felt there was no way out, and there was no possibility of change, and all kinds of things, as I recall. And it was very difficult making changes because I just thought it's not going to happen. There was an interesting question, and I'm sorry for those who sent questions in, and our broadcast is a little shorter tonight. But I wanted to, let's see, Jessica writes this. Jerry, how do I cope with an overly angry narcissistic family members that I've gone no contact with, but I see them in public? I'm not mad at them, but I need to protect my 11-year-old and myself from their anger. And I really, Kathy's asking, what's the name of the author? It's Margellus Fjellstead. And I think Rinda, who is helping me tonight, are you going to put that up on that? Rinda's going to put that up for you so you have her name for those books. So they're saying, what do I do to protect my 11-year-old and protect me from narcissistic folks that I have to see? Or let's say you grew up or your family all goes to this one Catholic church. And then you don't want to change churches, and it's the churches where your kids are belong, but you have narcissistic family members who go to that church. Now, you don't have to sit next to them, but you're going to be seeing them, and what are we going to do if they're going to be angry or act out? And that's no different than if any adult that you know and your kids know are immature, acting out, acting inappropriately, being disrespectful, being angry, any of those kinds of acting out kind of behaviors. What I think of doing is educating your kids using calm, objective beliefs and not reactivity, such as, hey, your grandmother may say this or say that, or your aunt may say this or say that. I believe she's got her own issues. I'm not going to go into detail about those, but I want to let you know, and she may do things like that. So I'm educating and talking to the kids so that they're aware. So it's not a big surprise or they're not floored. Oftentimes kids already understand anyway. They usually know, crazy Aunt Mary. I know Aunt Mary's crazy. And that when we have a bunch of family members and they all have groupthink and they all do smear campaigns and what I call narcissistic groupthink bullying or the smear campaign. And that's very difficult on us because we're just one person. That's when we need to learn to stand alone. That power of standing alone is very important. I don't care if 6 people think I'm crazy. I can still, there are, you may have 6 people, but I have 2 that are more powerful. Me and me. And that's being willing to stand alone. And we want to bolster that me and me. And so we want to reframe, because we can feel real uneasy. Well, what if they say this? Or are they talking about me? Or they're probably talking about blah, 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 or whatever they're talking about. And it's negative, and they're criticizing me, and they're telling other church members how awful I am, or whatever. Then what we want to do is reframe that bullying and reframe that, especially if we're going to come into some kind of close contact with it. And so when they give me a stare, I see it and see them as delivering an X-ray beam or a ray beam of ice cream coming my way. I want to reframe what they're doing so that I don't take it as wounding, but I take it as ridiculous. And that can be more helpful. When they say mean things in public, smile and laugh about something you think is funny. It may have nothing to do with what they said. Just be prepared to think of something funny. When you hear something or hear them acting, because they're acting crazy by saying mean things and silly stuff in public. We don't want to give it that much power. Their stares are only as powerful as an X-ray beam of ice cream. I'm sorry, it's not any more powerful than that. If you give it more power, then it's going to cut right through you. You decide to turn down the voltage on it. I don't care what their voltage is, I'm going to turn down my voltage. I've suggested some people start reciting the Gettysburg Address. What's wrong with reciting the Gettysburg Address? I've even had couples do that. I'll say, do you know a good poem? Yeah, I knew some poems when I was in school, and this is the poem that I knew. Okay, when things get really heated with you and your husband, I want you to start reciting the poem to yourself. And instead of arguing, recite that poem. Well, the poem doesn't have anything to do with what we're arguing about. Well, believe it or not, what you're arguing about doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing. Quite honestly, it's just a symptom. So you think you're actually arguing about something serious. No, it's probably symptomatic. So go ahead and state the poem. And that would be actually less crazy than you guys arguing all night. It really would. It would at least be less crazy. Well, somebody would think I was nuts if I was... No, I think you're nuts for arguing for 4 hours. That's nuts. Reciting the Gettysburg Address is not nuts. It really isn't. And then I've said in previous broadcasts when we've been together, name calling. You know, when you get name called, oh, well, there she is. She won't talk to us, the narcissistic family members doing all kinds of, she thinks she's better than us, or whatever might be said, or you are just such a mean person, or whatever. Or you're not a Christian. I wish you were a Christian. It's too bad my brother didn't marry a Christian. That would be the narcissistic family criticizing the wife. And what we want to do is change the name calling to, and I like using Coca-Cola. They're calling me a Coke. Okay, I'm not a Coke, but if you see me as a Coke, then I guess that's okay. Because they're saying I'm mean and I'm not a Christian. That's totally ridiculous. It's not true. They're just saying it to be hurtful. They're not saying it because it's true. They're saying it to be hurtful. And so I want to turn it into Coca-Cola. Oh, that's about a 20-minute question. That's a great question, but it's a, let me see here. Okay. The, the, well, Heather's got a good question. I wanted at least, how do I remove my expectations of my mom being anything other than who she has always been to me? The rejection by her still feels the same to me internally as when I was a child. And you're right. The trance is still very powerful. And those are systems feelings. You're supposed to feel that way to make her actions and the way she feels and what she says be so powerful. And so what I've tried to help people begin to do is, I want you to see your mother as her first name and not M-O-M. Like in my case, I wanted to change mom to Joanne, Joann. That's my mother's name. I wanted to change her to be a person, not the big mother. That's a beginning to see her differently. Also, we can begin to ask ourselves, if I didn't feel the rejection and Jerry had a magic wand and could wave that wand over me and I didn't feel rejected, what would be the downsides for me? Now, Heather, you might say, oh, well, I'd only have good sides. That would be wonderful if I could do that. Well, of course you would, and that would be wonderful if you could. But what would be the downsides? If you don't feel rejected, what could happen? What might you do differently that would disrupt the system? That's probably what you're afraid of, which is why you hold on to the rejection. Because you don't have to feel rejected when mom says whatever she says. Coca-Cola, ice cream, or any other crazy thing she's saying. You don't have to feel rejected. Mom doesn't make you feel that way. We feel that way because that's our relationship with our family and that's what we've learned. But it's not immovable or irreversible or unchangeable. It's not. And that's the good news. And that's the very good news. Well, I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody's questions tonight. I may bring some of these back the next time we do a live broadcast. We've come to about 9:32, something like that. And I do want to let you know that our next live stream is going to be on July the 30th. Just that, not that. Okay, July the 30th, and that will be with Mark and Rhonda. With Mark on vacation and Rhonda? I don't understand.
We're on vacation on the 23rd.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, Mark and Rhonda on vacation on the 23rd. There's going to be a live stream broadcast on July the 30th. That's what I wanted to tell you. I'm so grateful Rhonda Smith was here tonight to help me with questions. And you might visit her at renspire.com. renspirelifecoaching.com. You can visit me at www.jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com. You can sign up for my email list. Also, you can join me on my YouTube channel where there's 150 videos over there, and this one will be on there eventually. And you might go there and subscribe there as well. I also have a Facebook page. If you'd like to work with me, reach out to me via email, or I think I have my phone number on the website as well. I do want to thank everyone for being patient with our technical difficulties tonight. I'm sorry we started late. There are some other great questions that people sent in. I wrote notes on them. So now that I've got notes on them, I can also bring them back. I might even do a live broadcast or something on my YouTube channel and maybe catch up on some of those questions for folks, and I'll let you know about that as well. So, again, for Rinda and I appreciate it, Rinda, you helping me. And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. And I hope you have a great week. And thanks for listening, guys. See ya.